We are anonymous. Not a single person, not a political party, not a corporation with donors to please. A signal in the dark. A reminder that power is supposed to answer to the people. And today I'm exposing what's really happening behind Donald Trump's controversial White House ballroom plan, because this isn't just about a building. It's about ego secrecy, manipulation of the courts, and a dangerous attempt to stretch executive power beyond its limits. Here's what happened. Donald Trump decided that the historic East Wing of the White House wasn't good enough, not grand enough, not luxurious enough, not reflective of what he believes power should look like. So the East Wing part of the White House complex that has stood for generations was demolished, reduced to rubble. This wasn't some minor renovation. This was a sweeping destruction of a historic structure to make way for a 100,000-square-foot ballroom he promises will be the finest anywhere in the world. And it didn't happen quietly. Questions immediately arose about whether proper historic preservation reviews were completed, whether required oversight processes were followed, and whether Congress gave clear authorization. The White House is not private property. It is a national historic site. Changes to it are supposed to follow strict procedures. But instead of slow, transparent compliance, we saw speed. Demolition first, justification later. That's when the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a congressionally chartered nonprofit dedicated to protecting historic American places, filed a lawsuit to block construction of the ballroom. They couldn't undo the demolition. That damage was already done, but they moved in time to try to halt what comes next. The case landed in federal court in Washington, D.C. before Judge Richard Leon. And that's when Donald Trump did something extraordinary. Before the judge even ruled, before a preliminary injunction was issued, Trump rushed to court asking the judge to stay, to pause a ruling that did not yet exist. Think about that. He asked the judge to block his own future decision before the judge made it. Why? Because Trump claims that if construction is halted, it will imperil his life. It will endanger the Secret Service. It will threaten national security. He says he cannot explain the reasons publicly, but will submit classified declarations detailing what is happening underneath the ballroom site. That is not hyperbole. That is what his legal team argued in court filings. Trump's logic is breathtaking. He demolished the East Wing. That demolition created an open construction site. He now claims that this open site is itself a hazard that complicates Secret Service operations. Therefore, if the court stops him from completing his ballroom, the president's life could be at risk. He created the hazard, and now he claims the only solution is to let him continue building. This is the pattern: manufacture urgency, then demand extraordinary leeway. His filings go further. They assert there are additional classified reasons submitted in supplemental declarations explaining why halting construction would endanger national security and impair the public interest. Classified reasons. Beneath the ballroom footprint. Beneath the rubble of the demolished East Wing. We already know there is a Cold War-era bunker beneath the White House complex, built decades ago for emergency continuity of government. That fact is public. It exists. It's old. It was designed for a different era. So when Trump's lawyers argue that below-ground work on waterproofing, security upgrades, and utility infrastructure must proceed regardless of what structure stands above ground, serious questions naturally follow. Is this about updating hardened facilities, expanding secure infrastructure? If so, why embed it inside a privately funded ballroom project? Why argue that the ballroom and any national security elements are inextricably intertwined, meaning the court cannot separate the security-related components from the vanity construction? If national security infrastructure is truly at stake, then it should be transparently authorized and publicly funded with congressional oversight. That is how constitutional governance works. But Trump's argument blurs those lines. He claims wealthy donors, billionaires aligned with his political network, are funding the ballroom. At the same time, he argues that the project is so bound up with national security that stopping it would endanger the nation. You cannot simultaneously claim something as a privately financed luxury upgrade and a critical national security necessity shielded by classified declarations. Meanwhile, the National Trust responded forcefully. They filed a motion to strike Trump's request for a stay. Their position was straightforward. You cannot request relief from a ruling that does not yet exist. It is premature, speculative, legally improper. In plain language, Trump is attempting to pressure the court before it even rules. Judge Leon, during hearings, reportedly signaled skepticism. He questioned whether the executive branch was effectively attempting to sidestep congressional oversight, whether the administration was stretching its authority. That skepticism likely explains Trump's preemptive panic, because this isn't just about marble and chandeliers. It's about precedent. If a president can demolish part of the White House complex without full oversight and then argue that halting his replacement project endangers national security, what limit remains? If classified filings can be invoked to shield a luxury construction from judicial scrutiny, what prevents that tactic from being used elsewhere? Trump's legal team argues that any injunction would worsen the situation, leaving an unsightly excavation in President's Park and creating an imbalance between the West Wing and the demolished East Wing. Think about that logic. He destroys a historic structure. He creates rubble. Then he argues that stopping his new project would look worse than the destruction he caused. That argument is not about preservation. It is about inevitability. The message is clear. It's too late to stop this. The damage is done. Let me finish. Throughout history, leaders with authoritarian tendencies have been drawn to monumental construction, grand halls, expansive complexes, architectural symbols of permanence, buildings that reflect personal legacy rather than institutional humility. It's not the building itself that raises alarms, it's the process, the secrecy, the rush, the invocation of national security to silence opposition. The White House does not belong to Donald Trump. It does not belong to any president. It belongs to the American people. It is a symbol of continuity, not personality. Every modification carries weight. That's why preservation processes exist. Yet while millions of Americans struggle with rising costs of living, healthcare challenges, and economic uncertainty, this administration is locked in court, arguing that a ballroom must proceed immediately to protect the president's life. Trump publicly boasts that the project is on budget and ahead of schedule. He promotes glossy renderings of what he calls a magnificent new East Wing. He frames it as an upgrade for hosting foreign dignitaries and future inaugurations, suggesting that temporary tents used in the past lacked dignity. Dignity. The irony is sharp. Dignity in governance comes from respecting institutions, not gilding ceilings. Dignity comes from transparency, not classified declarations used as shields. Dignity comes from following the law, not racing around it. There are indications that Trump's legal strategy anticipates appeals, potentially seeking emergency relief from higher courts if Judge Leon issues an injunction. The approach appears tactical: build momentum, argue that stopping construction disrupts the status quo, and frame any judicial interference as harmful to national security. It is a gamble on speed and spectacle. But the fallout extends beyond this one case. If courts bend under claims of undefined security threats, the boundary between genuine national defense concerns and political leverage erodes. If private donors can finance projects intertwined with executive facilities, while national security justifications are invoked, transparency fades. This is how democratic norms weaken, not through one dramatic collapse, but through incremental expansions of power justified by urgency. Donald Trump sees a ballroom. Many Americans see something else, a test of whether the rule of law still constrains executive ambition. Judge Leon will issue his decision. Appeals may follow. The excavation may remain a scar on President's Park, or the ballroom may rise in polished stone and glass. But the deeper question, whether executive power can bulldoze process and then demand deference under the banner of national security, will linger. Anonymous does not oppose renovation. Anonymous opposes unchecked power.